Well, thanks for having us. I'm Pavlyn, Jankov, Director of Research, and
Chris Poulos. I'm a public finance analyst.
Yeah, it's really good to hear that there are people with context around Chicago public schools and context around serving the public good in the different ways they're all organized. So we want to talk about the public schools. We want to talk about our fights, what we do at CTU for Chicago, as well as some work we're doing statewide because we're a union and we have relations with other unions statewide. Chris is going to talk a bit more about the data, but we're going to go back and forth and talk about the projects we've been working on, go through some of the context of what we do, our organization, the political context in which we operate, that this is our world in which, data and transparency, these are all contested things and there's a lot of meaning behind them, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that and some examples of our organizing work and how we've used our data, and then go into some of the particular applications of that stuff. So who is CTU and the Illinois Federation of Teachers? So CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union, we represent 30,000 teachers, paraprofessionals, counselors, clinicians, tech coordinators across Chicago public schools, district schools, as well as charter schools. We've organized. And the Illinois Federation of Teachers, the union, the statewide union that we're federated with, represents 100,000 teachers across the state. So CTU, we're a union. We represent our members. And our members work in public schools, and our members care about public schools. They work in our schools. They serve students, and so they care about the public good. And we, as a union, know that the work of our members is not something that's done in isolation with what's happening in our society, right? And so, as a union, we are organizing the way we move through the world, the way we work with our members, goes way beyond social issues, goes way beyond bread and butter issues to also focus on social issues, how they impact our classroom, and that's why our campaigns like fully funding schools and tax-rich campaigns are so critical. Chris, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say to that too. I think what CTU did. I'm relatively new working for CTU, though I've been around in sort of the organizing spaces in Chicago for a bit of time. But what CTU did in the 2010s to kind of revamp the model from the sort of it's just services, it's just kind of sometimes what's referred to as like a business style union and doing the organizing pieces was really big, and it made a lot of gains and prevented a lot of things that could have been harmful to public education in Chicago, like more privatization, more school closures, and that kind of thing. And I think it's a really important opportunity now that Stacey Davis Gates, the president of CTU, is also the president of IFT. And we can start thinking of some of this stuff on a statewide scale, which is, necessary. I mean, we were just, I think, talking about public transit in the city of Chicago. I think public transit, schools, all these different things. Time and again, it comes down to an issue of funding, and really that is the state's ability to raise revenue and invest in the public sector is very important. So this is a pretty important opportunity. And also it's kind of, now we're more included in state discussions than I think we were, a handful of months ago. Yeah,
so much of policy is statewide. There's so many distinctive things about Chicago. And then when we look at the ways in which poverty and the impacts of insufficiently funded schools, the same issues in Chicago are operating statewide. So really critical that we are doing our work together. Give you some context about one of our primary campaigns, probably the primary campaign, because it defines so much of what we do, is the quality of our schools. And the quality of our schools really boils down to, do we have enough resources to service the students and all the needs that we have across our city, across our state. And so we've been on this campaign to fully fund our schools. Really, this campaign is well beyond 2017. Illinois has been one of the states with the worst, most inequitable education funding formulas in the nation. We also have one of the most inequitable regressive tax structures in the nation. We're the eighth most regressive state. And so you can see how those two things are connected. And yet we also have very wealthy communities that actually do service, do spend a tremendous amount of money on education. It's just the problem is we don't, as a state, primarily fund education through the state. And so that's why there's a lot of inequity from community to community. So Illinois passed a bill to adequately fund schools. They changed their formula to account for need, and they have something called the evidence-based funding system. It's a great formula. The problem is they haven't funded it. They haven't put money in the formula to distribute it across the state. And they were supposed to do that by 2027. We're just way behind. We're still $5 billion short statewide. And if we look at the needs around pre-K, higher ed, it's billions more. So this is the priority. We have to fund education. We already have guidelines from the state about how to fund it, how to distribute the money. We just have to raise revenue to do that. You want to?
So yeah, I mean, the technical problem that we are facing is a pretty easy one to solve. Schools need funding according to this, even the state of Illinois' own calculations on adequate funding. You can look into that formula and, whatever, tweak it, have all your criticisms or whatnot. But I think the fact of the matter is roughly it's a formula that is based on need, and we're far short of that. But, the funding problem, as we face it, and a lot of other people face it, is not just a technical one, it's a political one. And I love this quote. Pavlyn was making fun of me for putting it up. I did my dissertation on public finance in Chicago and came across this quote of this guy who's kind of considered the founder of fiscal sociology. And he, in this essay or book, I think that he writes, he says, the budget is a skeleton of the state, stripped of all misleading ideologies. And when I first read that, I was like, no, there's nothing further from the truth of that. And in part because there is a group of people with money, the owning class, whatever you want to call them, that have a vested interest in making budgets very kind of difficult for us to engage with. Seeing some head nods. I don't think I'm saying anything that's too sort of wild for us to imagine. But that's very much like what at CTU right now, when we're thinking about using data and creating data tools, it's very much like trying to combat these ideologies that serve to sort of mystify budgets and make them difficult for people to grasp. Because at the end of the day, I mean, budgets to us are moral documents. They're a statement of political values and what we need and what we want. So a lot of what we've been doing is kind of playing around with Streamlit tools to sort of make quick, kind of easy to deploy tools to convey what seems to be or I think what sometimes to people can seem to be a little bit more kind of complex, I can't touch it, budget issues in budget policy. So for the since I've been on board, we've been playing around with that a little bit. And we just as a kind of to go back in terms of just to put a little kind of meat to this, like when I say that there is a group of people with vested interest to try to obfuscate these policies, Michael Sachs, who is a millionaire or billionaire, he is recently within the matter of weeks dropped over $10 million to push back against called a corporate head tax in the city of Chicago, which is just a very modest tax on corporations. We're not talking like, this is not like a super huge tax or whatever. This is a very modest tax on corporations that existed in Chicago for a while. And I mean, this is somebody that's willing to drop, put money into, ads during Bears games and that kind of thing. And so that just to give you a sense of, the politics that we're thinking about. I guess I said some of this, but. Yeah, I mean, essentially, as I was saying, like, so a key thing that we're doing is trying to communicate data to cut past these ideas that are being deployed against our interests and for the interests of millionaires and billionaires and so forth. And I come from like I said, sociology background. before I started using Python coding, I was like Stata. I don't know if anybody has heard of that. That was like what I was trained. I was like I'm very object-oriented languages scare me. I very much like, what is it called? Just, yeah, yes, okay, yeah. Just I would line by line and what have you. And I found Streamlit to be a relatively easy to use. I think Python language is relatively easy to use once you learn how to use it. To start conveying, when we're kind of kicking around ideas or data or what have you, it became a way to like a more accessible way to get some of our ideas and some of our analyses out to people. It's not like sending a spreadsheet or creating one page or whatever. It's kind of like, hey, like send something, send somebody a link they can open up on their phone and start playing around with some of this idea or some of this data and ideas and what have you.
And so much of our communication as a union, we on the research end, we're doing a lot of the analysis on the back end. Some, oftentimes we're engaging with our members to get data, right? And we're also looking at the original sources, looking at the budgets, trying to understand, when a budget passes, when there's a bill, what are the impacts on the community, what are the impacts on our schools, and our members, they want the information at the ground level. They want to know what's happening in their school. How is this going to impact my students and the issues that I'm facing day to day? So it's really critical that we're doing that work of translating it, because those day-to-day issues really are impacted by what is being obfuscated by the billionaire class. And so when we do this analysis, it's critical that we're not just sort of like giving top line bullet points, but really allowing members to engage in what's happening, do a little bit of like clicking through an app and understanding, oh, here's what's happening. If we did XYZ, like this would be the impact on my school. And so that's kind of the extra oomph that we're getting by digging a little bit deeper into how we communicate the information we get.
Yeah, so we want to kind of show you a few, or talk through a couple examples, and then kind of end with sort of what I see as some of the like good things about it, some of the challenges that we're running into as we sort of explore this realm.
So this slide just goes over some context of one of the funding fights we've been on for a long time. I have some headlines from back in 2016, 2019. This is probably from even before that in 2012, the 2012 strike. But in Chicago, the tax increment financing, TIFs. I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's essentially you've probably heard about it. But it is it is a tool that is meant to develop blighted communities and has been misused and abused in Chicago, probably to a level that is unlike any other city. Some of the biggest TIF districts are downtown and on the near west side, where we see all the corporations moving, right? And so those are not blighted communities, and they generate tremendous amounts of money each year that is reserved, held, and not distributed to taxing bodies, and is used ostensibly to further development in blighted communities. So we've been organizing around that, because we know that when you go from having $500 million in TIF revenue in the city in 2012 to over $1.5 billion, you know that there's a lot of value. This is property taxes being captured in communities that are not blighted. These are highly developed areas. And so why is that not going back to our taxing bodies for the public good? So we've been always, pushing for that money to go back into our schools. In 2012, there was a $50 million total TIF surplus. 14 years later, in the most recent budget that was passed, over $1 billion citywide, $500 million to schools, more to parks and libraries. And so this is something that our members are versed in, or I think the public has been engaged in, because it's been such a top line, funding issue. And so we tried a new approach with in the last budget fight, where with Mayor Johnson's budget that proposed a historic surplus, there was a lot of pushback from city council members, including support from billionaire Michael Sachs. And so we wanted to really drill down on what is the impact of not surplusing these TIFs. What happens if we don't actually achieve the budget? And so that's where, Chris, I'll hand it off to you. That's where we built this tool, took the analysis and drilled it down at the school level.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the useful thing about this is essentially it was a lookup tool. The code wasn't doing a lot of the calculations, behind the scenes. We did those ahead of time and put it in. But I think the utility of this was hand off to teachers that are doing lobbying efforts with their city council members, give them the ability just to look up real quick, hey, if you don't pass this budget, here's what my school stands to lose. The ability to, just kind of standardize or replicate quick fact sheets for people. It just became on our end something that was, one, something that we could promote, and then two, I don't know, I don't know how much you use this application, but very cool. We planted you in the audience, so you would say that. No. But yeah, I think we did hear feedback from teachers that it was a useful tool to use. Go on to the next one. This is a more recent one. Bears person who mentioned that you like the Bears so much moving to Arlington Heights. He's not paying attention. We created this mega project calculator to demonstrate. So just a rough context. The governor and some state leaders were trying to push forward a mega project bill that would subsidize projects over $100 million, anywhere from 25 years to 45 years. And again, it was a relatively kind of quick web app that we could make to say, hey, look up, put in your own tax rate. We have another one where it's look up your school district and let's walk through. My younger brother teaches out in 214, which is where the Bears are proposing to move. I could be, when he was talking to his different colleagues about this, it was just something I was like, hey, open up the app, see how much Arlington Heights stands to lose if the Bears end up getting, that project or what have you. Yeah.
And the mega projects is it's a different from TIF in that TIFs people have heard about. They understand, this is something that has been really taking from our public bodies. Mega projects, this bill came out and there was very little discussion around the actual impact on taxing bodies and school districts. It was portrayed as this is a keep the Bears in Illinois bill. That's how it was talked about, and it went way beyond the Bears, and that's what really we wanted to hone in on, because this was going to impact. In fact, some of the examples that we pulled was if this bill was in place, something like the Google headquarters that they bought the Thompson Center years ago from the state. They're plowing in hundreds of millions of dollars. When that headquarters opens, they're bound to be a $400-500 million valued property. They bought it for $100 million. A bill like this would have frozen their tax bill for upwards of 45 years at the dollar amount that they bought it for, right? So where do you get that as a homeowner? If you even clean your house a little bit before the assessor comes, they might they'll charge you more, right? And so this is really nationwide. We had not seen something that a state would implement something that would this drastically reduce tax dollars for taxing bodies, and it would lead to a tax shift to residents, homeowners, other corporations who would be footing the bill of increasing needs. And so we want that's a lot of information. We were calling this a TIF on steroids, and we wanted to get something out fast to start changing the narrative. Push back against what was being portrayed as save the Bears, keep the Bears in bill, when this was something much more disastrous for the state.
Well, and we had heard too that in the state legislature, the governor was trying to keep this kind of as under wraps as possible. And when you look at some of the the estimates that we put together of the potential tax revenue lost to local taxing bodies like schools, some of these are just your eyes pop out. It's so much money. So it's we goof around. Sometimes you put together some of these estimates and you're like, I can't be them. I must be off. I'm not great at math. I must have added a zero or something like that. But in fact, no, it is a case that it's in the billions of dollars. So I think this is an example of, once you see that, like the numbers are so stark, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, wait, why would they, well, like, is it necessary to subsidize the billionaire owner of whatever it is, billions of dollars that could be going to schools? We did get response from this one from the governor himself, actually, who saw the calculator. And, J.B. Pritzker, if you're watching this, I wholly disagree with your analysis of our calculator.
Well, their point is something we've heard before from people who try to defend subsidies for corporations, is that, well, you're counting on money that wouldn't be there in the first place. Corporations would never open up in Illinois unless they got all these tax breaks, right? This is the same kind of lowest common denominator thinking that we see, when states are busy giving away money to corporations just to try to land a couple of jobs. The sort of going on a side here, this is something we've looked at a lot. Like overwhelmingly, those tax breaks and subsidies, corporations are always breaking the rules around those things. There's actually a tracker online that looks at how often corporations are breaking those rules. But we organized with the tool. We put it out to our members. We put it out to the press. We got some commentary in the Tribune. Some experts, national experts, authored an opinion in the Chicago Business that said the bill is bad by design. We got some press, and then a week or maybe 2 weeks later, Treasurer Maria Pappas' office also put out their analysis after we did, but they also came up with some really stark numbers about how much the Bears would stand to gain by a bill like this passing. And so, it's critical that we do both the analysis, right, but also figure out a way to push this out. And we use the tool. This is the Illinois Federation of Teachers, along with Chicago Teachers Union and other folks down in Springfield, went to lobby day multiple times over the last couple months. And when this bill broke, we were honing in on the contrast between our schools. We started this presentation talking about the needs of our schools. We're billions of dollars short for our schools. It's 2027. Why do we not have our fully funded schools yet? And legislators were busy thinking about ways to give corporations and billionaire owners more tax breaks. So ultimately, that bill did not pass. I can't predict the future about what they're cooking up, but that bill, as written, did not pass.
Yeah, and kind of so to wrap this up and stuff that I already said, for us kind of using Streamlit and kind of getting more into trying to present data and using these data tools, found it like it's relatively easy to use. You can do quick. I mean, a lot of what we do, it's, for better or worse, and there's stuff that we have to think about in terms of planning stuff out. But it can be like, when do you need this? I needed it yesterday. So having kind of a language that allows for that is useful. There's also kind of pitfalls that open source. I think the fact that it's very transparent is good, because we have nothing to hide in our calculations or what have you. Let other people take a look at it, look at the code, try to improve on it and that kind of thing. Is important. I think the challenge is, I think a lot of this is like a double-edged sword. I think in some ways, I feel like there's the product of these, or the data products themselves, can kind of hide or veil some of the kind of underlying labor that goes in or should go into developing things like that. I mean, at the beginning, it's a basic data management is always an issue. How do you retrieve the data? How do you know it's vouch for the integrity of it? That kind of thing. Preparing the data. I mean, I will give anybody in this room $1 million if you can figure out like an efficient way to just pull together. We have years and years of data on public education from the State Board of Education. Find a way to put that data together. But when you start doing that, you see like just year to year, there's fields change names. Sometimes there's typos. Sometimes there's like all these different things that just, it's a very labor intensive process to do. knowing what it's telling you is another thing. I mean, there's, I was working with somebody not at CTU, but at my last job that was, very confident. Oh, I put together this data, but didn't know that, like, the fields themselves, they changed their methodology from year to year. So there's like a lot of like basic stuff like that you have to know. Like you need some knowledge of this going in, and it's just work. Project management and planning. I mean, I think there is a very kind of like call for this sort of bespoke app that can, do whatever you need it to do, quick turnarounds and that kind of thing. I think make that sort of use of AI or kind of like vibe coding, let's do it fast, quite popular. I did a little of that myself, and I think the pitfall of that is I look back at some of my code and I'm like, this is going to take me, I might as well just start over again because I can't work with this. So in hindsight, knowing that like, hey, some like work up front and planning it to say like, if I want to reuse it or if I want somebody else to be able to use it is like, these are things that like, I think that we're confronting as we're doing this. I mean, ADA accessibility is another thing in terms of just like if you're using HTML code, making sure like that's all, our communications person, chided me for that, being like, what is this? What is going on here? And it's like, all right, he's quite right. I was like new to it. And on the one hand, it's great because it allows us like access to something that we didn't have access to before. But on the other end, it's sort of, being able to like put some of that stuff into practice is important. Yeah, and I think just general sort of, thinking about the goals of data communication, again, for the call for sort of different web apps and stuff, I think there's we want a widget or we want this, that, and the other thing. And the question is, okay, well, who's actually using it and how are you conveying data? At some point you're like, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do the other thing. It's like, well, what do I actually need to, what am I trying to accomplish here in telling a story with the data? Yeah, I don't know. This is kind of just some thoughts moving forward in terms of stuff that we are thinking about as we've used Streamlit more. And yeah, I don't know if this is, or ignore this, but I'm curious to hear what people think about. You said you use Streamlit, but other ways that people are, other tools people are using to communicate data. Yeah, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You want to call on people, and I'll use my mic pass.
Your hand went up, and then your hand went up, and then you.
Thank you. First question was just if you could just show us the calculator, because I'm very curious what it actually looks like. And then the second question was, since it's more of a request, how did you guys market these tools? Like, is it you have these all just go to your teachers, and so you have like a newsletter? Did you do like Instagram and social marketing? Like, how do you get it so that people are paying attention to your work?
Yeah, I would say two different things, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit more. For the protecting Chicago schools, it was more of we were handing it off to CTU members and staff to use it, and I think we did some media around it. The calculator one was more, I think, kind of a media-driven thing, trying to get it out there in sort of the public sphere, but I don't know.
Yeah. And for the protecting Chicago schools, we also did something a little bit similar recently, but we directly communicate with our members. We'll send them text blasts. We'll send them in our emails. We get these tools to our delegates who do a lot of work, getting that information to their members in their building, so that it's like, okay, CTU has this tool. You want to understand why it is that I need you to contact your older person and advocate for a budget. It's because it's going to have an impact on our school like this, and you can even check it out yourself. Like, so we want members using this to have conversations in their buildings too. It's like another tool for organizing in the building. So it's not, it's not just we could be e-blasting and sending text messages, but we also want conversations to happen, because it's not even necessarily about the, like, we want them to be armed with the numbers, but we also want them to have a conversation about, like, well, look what's happening in our school. We could have a lot more resources if we get this policy passed.
I want to put this in a trying to embed it somewhere. But yeah, this is the Protecting Chicago Schools. Again, just a basic lookup tool that's saying if the Protecting Chicago budget didn't pass with the TIF surplus, looking at the amount that each school would lose. Just again, like the basic idea was make it easy for teachers to kind of prepare for these meetings. So just a little bit of, one pager that was easy to kind of standardize for people to pull that out, have some general sort of high level talking points as well as specifics about the school. So we had that as a word lookup and a school level lookup if people wanted to. And then the mega project calculator there's two different versions of this. This one went out to kind of journalists with more of a knowledge of it to begin with. So the basic idea was select your tax rate. So this is set to Arlington Heights total tax rate. Cook County selection was you need to do that for to do the tax calculations correctly. And then it was sort of pick your example. So, the Bears Stadium in Arlington Heights gives you a total loss of, total revenue without the bill. So in this case, roughly 10.8 billion, and then the revenue loss, which is equal here. In some cases, depending on the total investment, if it's between 100 million and 2 billion, there was some kind of payback that owners would have to pay back to the taxing bodies. But in the case of if it's over $1 billion, there wasn't any stipulation. So in this, so kind of giving people a sense of that. And then we made kind of a companion for more of a kind of a walkthrough for people that it seems to, there we go. Come on, you got it. Yeah, so this one was just a little bit more walk through the stages to understand exactly, or to get a better sense of how the bill works and sort of the mechanics of it. Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, so it starts off with just some general kind of context of the bill, and then that walks people through the steps of the bill. So kind of giving people a sense of the bill starts at projects over 100 million. You can select kind of an example or make your own custom amount. So let's say, Amazon warehouse, then it sort of gives the basic ideas is this one is kind of walking people through the mechanics of the bill. In this case, because it's over 500 million, it has a 30 to 35 year tax break. You can select your school district, again, just as an example, and so on and so forth. So again, just kind of a point of it is kind of didactic, get people to learn about the legislation at the same time they're learning about these wild amounts of money. I feel like I'm doing a bad job. I think you had a question, then you, and then kind of work our way back. Or maybe, I don't know. I'll trust your judgment on this.
Hi, y'all. Well, thank you for presenting. Also, people love a interactive web app with data, so shout out to y'all for these. They look very cool. I'm interested in getting more of a sense of how Streamlit has been helpful, because I'm curious, especially in the context of the ward level one pagers that y'all sent out. You mentioned that you still had to data clean, you still had to do the calculations on the back end. So where does Streamlit plug into that in terms of sort of simplifying the process of creating both the interactive pages and also the one pagers that y'all mentioned?
Yeah, I think the use of Streamlit is just an easy tool to make it publicly available to people. A lot of other stuff we were doing, the calculations happened on the back end of figuring out, what the TIF surplus looked like and putting together those calculations. So that wasn't as much of I think Streamlit was useful in sort of the widgets that you could put together, the selectors and that kind of thing. Which, sure, if you have knowledge of other languages, again, communications specialist at CTU, Nate, is like, oh, you can do all that with JavaScript. And I'm like, I know that, but I just don't know JavaScript, So you can, I think it's a similar, you can do this, what have you, but it made it easier to put up. The one pagers was just me doing HTML code and adding variables, like doing that. So there was some level, of gaining some level of like, okay, if you know how to kind of format an HTML page, then you can put that in. And again, just very nice. I think it's just nice, simple, like, does the work for you once the code is all there.
Could we see a backend example of one of the Streamlit sort of setups?
Yes, we can. And I can, did you want to directly respond to that, or should we go to the next question as I open this up? I don't want to.
We can go to the next question. Thank you.
My question is more about the direction you're getting for designing these tools. Is it coming more like per request from the organizers, from leadership, or is this more like you're thinking about what campaigns do we have now? What actions do we want people to take? What messages or stories we're trying to tell? And how do we get the data to tell those stories? What's the proportion of your work between those two things, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's both. We're responding to, for example, the mega projects, right? That's something that we don't necessarily plan for. We know that every session there's going to be something that is more of a danger to school funding than something that moves the ball. So we always anticipated needing to have some kind of data out there that communicates to members about here's how much funding is at stake if we don't fully fund schools. But the actual mega projects bill was sort of like a curveball, something that we suddenly quickly had to grasp the back end on, understanding even like how to do those calculations, like understanding how the taxes would not be produced by the bill, understanding the bill language, and so we were doing that ahead of time a little bit before sort of things had coalesced, and was like, oh, we really need to communicate this. We need to get in front of the media. It was clear media wasn't picking up the right angle on this, and so our communicators are people in the schools. Sometimes we will get that from our people in the schools, but this was something that was just a pulse about the way in which this bill was being talked about, and we had started doing some of that work and trying to understand that bill, and then suddenly we're at the point where it's like, well, we better put together a Streamlit on this, because we need to take this opportunity. Things move fast at the legislature in order to get in front of the bill. So it's context dependent, right? When we know like there's a deadline, if we're in the city budget fight, we know there might be an arc. There's a campaign arc. We might be able to do something on the front end, in which case we might have more opportunity to think about like the best practices for what all we need to be in that tool. Does it need to be a PDF? But other times we're responding and we're thinking about, well, what can we produce now, and then what will be impactful for the need. And in the case of the mega projects, as Chris was saying, we had the walkthrough tool. We really wanted journalists to understand the bill. That was an important part, because they just weren't tracking what the impact of the bill was, and so that defined how we put together the app, because we don't want it to just be spitting out data. Like, we don't want it to just be a table. We want them to understand our process of analyzing the bill.
And this is kind of a basic kind of structure of a Streamlit app folder. This has basic kind of design elements. This is like, this is like the boilerplate structure I use now. When I first started, it still probably looks messy to some people, but it was much messier when I first started this. And then this is, just the basic kind of Python code that goes into it. It's relatively standard. I mean, now, like, kind of as I think about this, and as I do more of the kind of thinking about the design elements of it, I think I'm more often kind of using HTML and that kind of thing. And so part of me is like, well, maybe kind of just moving this to just templates of HTML, CSS, JavaScript might be a way forward on this. I get like Streamlit is just, I think, a very nice foray into this kind of work. But like mostly what this is, and kind of hard to see, but like we're loading, I mean, we load in the main data set that we did prior to that. There's not a lot of the calculation that's actually happening within this, though there's future projects that I could think of where it would actually be necessary for the calculation to happen in Streamlit. So if you're thinking like the evidence-based funding formula, there are calculations where if you change that around, you couldn't do that prior. You would have to do it within the application itself to say, okay, well, how many more positions would it create if legislators increase the funding from 300 million to 500 million? That would have to happen within it. But mostly this is just pull in the data set and then use the different kind of the library of tools to say, you know, do this drop down, put this button in here, and so on and so forth. And then the one with the one pagers in our Chicago Teachers Union GitHub, which you can look at, it's like warning, very messy. But you could find how I did the HTML code within that one.
So, $5 billion, that's I don't know, a lot of money. Like, how, I don't know, let's say you guys get an extra $1 billion or $3 billion. Like, how does that change the kids' experience, or how I don't know, can you make the impact more tangible?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to respond to that? Yeah, you mean in terms of how we can convey that data? Yeah, I mean, one thing that I did with an evidence-based funding calculator, one thing we do is, I think just like, so great question. I think on the one hand, I think it's like, how do you make the dollars most legible to people? I think on a per pupil basis is nice. You can compare, like Pavlyn compared, okay, right now, you know, like New Trier students, it's like, per pupil spending is like 15,000 and more than that maybe. And so you can say, well, imagine if. Another thing that I did for a group was breaking it down to positions. This would mean blank more teacher positions. This would mean, so like what we did with a recent budget calculator for CPS was saying, okay, right now, according to CPS's new funding formula, there's a potential loss of about 800 district-funded teacher positions. So just teacher positions, not other things. And we said, okay, if evidence-based funding was fully funded, that would mean it could cover the 800 plus add another 8,000 teachers. So things like trying to figure out things like that, I think, is like sort of like an interesting and fun challenge. I mean, like you're going to talk to your legislator as a teacher, and it's like, what can I say to like really drive this home, or just fire people up?
Yeah, I mean, are kids having to go much further to get to a school because of closure, or are classrooms, how many more kids are they getting?
Mm-hmm.
How much less attention?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times they say like this is 4 art teachers,
Yeah.
6 music teachers, because
Right.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right, we got more questions.
So, as a union, you primarily function as an organizing body. And so I was wondering, how well can your average member articulate the work that you're doing and the data that you're presenting to them?
I mean, to the point that was just made earlier, like they're in their schools, they understand, they do a better job translating what their budget needs are when they're talking to their legislators, right? Because they know what the budget coming down from the district is, what that's going to mean for their classroom. And so the bridge is that we want our members understanding that that doesn't have to be the case, that there are state policies in effect that are saying we ought to be funding special education needs, so that there's a teacher assistant in every classroom, so that they don't have to worry about a student leaving the classroom and suddenly, there aren't enough adults in the building. So they can draw those connections while also talking to the policymaker about here's why the choice you have to either support this policy or not is going to have this like real world impact in my school. So I think like our members, they build the muscle about talking about their schools, and we also want to, organize them and talk to them and have them draw the bridge between the policies that are being, chosen and what's happening in their schools.
And more particularly on that point, so there's the boots on the ground effect of funding, but then there's the policy level of specific legislation that's being voted on, here and now, and you're making calculators and pagers that are speaking about this legislation that's happening. And so for a member of your union, are they understanding exactly what this legislation is going, like how that is translating into their boots on the ground experience? Can they express this? Do they feel like they understand the law? Is this something that's overwhelming them? What is that experience like for
Yeah, I think it's mixed. I don't know, we talk about EBF a lot, evidence-based funding. We communicate it so much to our members. I don't know the extent to which they understand all the nuances of the policy, and if they want to know more, we're going to do a better job communicating that. But the baseline, the main point is that there's a policy that's saying they ought to have more resources in their schools. Legislators have failed to fund that policy. Here's the impact in my school building of your failure. And so I think that you don't necessarily have to understand why it is the formula, it says they need, 10 teachers versus, other kinds of supports. You just need to be able to advocate for the choice at hand. But, I'd also invite any members in in the room. Kirti, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. I don't want to call you.
I mean, I think one thing that the tools have been really helpful for us, especially in the last couple of years, is really empowering us to have better facts when we have conversations with our local aldermen or states legislatures, because a lot of times what ends up happening is before we had these tools, you go there and you talk about, hi, I'm at a school with 600 students and we had 200 of them are English language learners, and we had one teacher that spoke Spanish, but then she got cut, and they're oh, well, that sucks for your school. Or there's these individual stories, but it's very easy for politicians to dismiss them as individual stories. But with tools like this, especially this was 2 weeks ago, we went to our alderman's office, who is not very supportive, but we were able to go to him and be hey, 14 of our schools are actually going to get cuts right now. 16 teachers are losing their jobs right now, and being able to be no, this isn't just my sob story. This is across your entire district, and having 4 teachers show up and each of them knowing this is what's happening for your district. 14 teachers are losing jobs. 14 of your schools have teachers that are extremely upset that they're going to have classrooms with less teachers, less SICAs, less TAs, whatever it is. Just really helps them that same conversation I had before 2 years ago or now, you go to them and they're oh, okay, wait, let me give you the email right now. Please email them. They're in Springfield. Contact them. We're going to reach out to them as well and make sure that they know that you're here. Because before you just show up and they're oh, okay, cool. Well, have a nice day, but it makes them feel a little more pressed that, okay, we need to listen to them because they actually kind of know what they're talking about. So that was just one example recently that really helped, with us. Yeah.
Three more questions, I would say. Okay, you want to call it? I don't know.
Keep working back. I say 3 questions. There's 4 hands. I can't. No.
Given your requirements for speed and making something visually compelling, and all the other requirements that you talked about for these visualizations, can you talk about the trade-offs that you made in terms of choosing the technology as opposed to maybe a no-code platform like Tableau or Power BI that's uglier but faster versus bespoke JavaScript, systems? Did you try to make this trade-off as an organization, and how did you think about all these different factors that you need to meet to decide the technology?
I mean, what I'll say is I just kind of started doing it and sending it along. At my last job, we used Tableau a lot. I hate Tableau. It's very annoying to use. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out there. But I used it so much, and I kept thinking to myself when I was using it, there must be an easier way. There must be something with, and so that's kind of when I started. I had used this is the first time I really, or when I started working at CTU, when I first started using Streamlit. Before that, I kind of dabbled in R and the R Shiny, which is essentially kind of a similar kind of tool. And so when I was playing around with that and seeing like, okay, you can like actually, I'm just a little bit more comfortable using Python. That's kind of, it's sort of like happenstance that did it. We haven't really like explored a lot of different options. So I think there are a lot of like different interesting, ways to visualize data too. I worked a little bit at my prior job with Flourish, which is kind of like a scrolly telling format, which I think is kind of like interesting. Like just like part of me thinks like, oh, I sound silly saying that, but like I think it is interesting in terms of like how you're conveying, actually visualizing the data. And the reason I like things like Flourish and what have you is like it's telling a story, and I think sometimes it still can kind of have that sort of interactive animated feel to it, but it avoids the pitfall of just being too expecting everybody to be as interested in you in playing around with the data as opposed to kind of just conveying something.
I was wondering, because CTU is housed under IFT, under AFT, I was wondering if this kind of push and movement to kind of be able to push out more of these quick, readable dashboards and stuff, is that a CTU specific? Is that coming from AFT? And also kind of as a sub question on that, is there any collaborations with other kind of organizing groups within Chicago like SEIU to kind of help with pushing this sort of thing out?
A quick answer on that. So like CTU started doing it, but now that we have leadership in IFT, like the mega project calculator was an IFT thing, so that's kind of to where that came from. And we, like the calculator, we were part of the TIF calculator, the budget one. CTU was part of a citywide coalition, and sort of we were sharing that around.
The People's Unity platform, a collaborative across grassroots organizations. We were all part of this budget coalition who were trying to get the budget passed, and so we were also pushing that budget tool out to them as well, because they're folks who are engaged with their schools. They might not necessarily work there. They're not necessarily our members. Some are, but they can have other touch points with their alders from a different perspective about why it is they need their school and their community funded. And so I foresee us like continuing to do that kind of work where we're pushing out tools because we're able to react to a bill that's coming out, react to a policy change. I think some of that is related to like what Chris, like what we introed with earlier, like the organizing model, like we have an opportunity to make change. We have an opportunity to get a tool in front of our members. We have an opportunity to do political education, and that's what drives change. And so let's use our tools as a union to do that. And like we're seeing the fruits of that with IFT on the statewide initiative. So we hope to like see that as well, on other issues as we like, expand our coalitions around this work.
Yeah, my question is, like, what was the user or public reception to Streamlit? Was the interface up to the job of what people are used to using? And then I guess secondarily, so Streamlit like handles interactivity in a particular type of way, and I found sometimes it's problematic to get it to function reliably. So did you have any issues in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard, this is actually something that as we're now using it more regularly, trying to figure out ways to get broader feedback about how people's experiences using it. I'll say in terms of last year when we did this budget calculator, I did hear from organizers and members, like they appreciated having the tool when they were going and talking with city council members. On the opposite end of that, the mega project calculator, which we made two different versions. The one was kind of geared towards, again, people that are more familiar with kind of data journalists and people that were familiar with the bill. And then I got a lot of pushback from members that were like, I had no idea what the heck. And I was like, that one wasn't geared towards you. Sorry. And we kind of made something that was a little bit more geared towards to people that wanted to learn about the bill. So I think it's just that kind of back and forth. I mean, sometimes you just have to hit the ground running do something, and especially like in our kind of line of work and organizing and that kind of thing, and sort of play it by ear. And then yeah, I think it's sort of, I guess, like an iterative process sometimes too, and which is the nice thing about Streamlit is like you can kind of you can make changes pretty easily with it. Yeah.
So yeah, I love this as sort of like a rapid prototyping of data journalism stories. I am curious though, like have you applied Streamlit or these skills, or is there a capacity within the CTU to also produce software that helps teachers with other kinds of challenges? Because Streamlit, in theory, like, you know, if it can make political communication easier, maybe it can make other parts of teachers' jobs easier, and that would be interesting and potentially beneficial. And I'm also like, there are all these companies that create software that I'm sure teachers that are your members use. Those require resources from taxpayers, and that could also be another way to free up resources that could be reallocated towards teachers and employees and the various other things that teachers care about. So I'm curious, like, have there been any applications of this outside of political communication as well, or is it primarily focused there?
So I know, I don't know if this like fully answers your question, but like our CTU also houses a professional development and foundation arm, the CTU Foundation, and the Quest Center is our professional development arm. We work with our members. We also work with other teachers who are interested in our courses, and I know we have a couple of folks who are thinking about that kind of work, like the because a lot of our teachers are making curriculum, they're supplementing their work, they're dealing with technology that is pushed down on them because the district buys spends millions of dollars on a contract, and that's all the budget has access for, and so they have to work with the set of tools, and teachers are always figuring out ways to make that work for them. And our Quest Center has a line on that, and I think and offers some curriculum around that, but we haven't that is something new. It's like we haven't really thought about the work that we're doing and whether there are ways in which we can interact with that sphere. So thanks for raising it. But
Cool.
yeah.
I love what you guys are doing.
This is, I think, just a more technical question, but can you explain kind of the data pipeline, how you get from your data sources, whatever they may be, how it populates here in Streamlit?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of what we're doing is prior to it being loaded into Streamlit. I'm trying to, I don't know if we've had...
Is this using public data?
Use of, yeah. I mean, well, virtually all the data that we use is public data, with maybe rare exception. Like, I think some of the calculations we put together for the school position loss was based on our calculations based on presentations that CPS did. Mm-hmm. But a lot, the evidence base, I mean, mostly it's public data that comes out, and there might be some assumptions that we make based on, if we're doing some estimate of, hey, this is how much TIF funding a school might lose. We try to be as transparent as we can if we make calculations like that ahead of time.
And that's all integrated in the script, your Python script.
Yeah, it's all it's loaded into the data's loaded into the Python script. There's not a ton that the script itself is sort of cleaning. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That concludes our presentations, all the time we have. Sorry. We gotta get, so thank you so much.